Hello, everyone. My name is Katina Brown, and I am a learning associate in the doctoral program for Northern Kentucky University. I wanted to share a little bit about myself as the current director of district-wide services for Newport Independent Schools in Newport, Kentucky. Over the course of my educational experience, I have worked in public schools for now 22 years. I started out as a teacher, teaching sixth grade resource mathematics with our special education students for, again, 11 years, and working with the sixth grade team collaboratively, ensuring that our students had opportunities and access. I also, in that role, was the liaison between Eastern Kentucky University as well as the middle school and working around the lens of culture responsive teaching and learning. We had a very diverse group of students ethnically in terms of culture and those dynamics within the building with staff and with our families and the community of that middle school. And so I had a lot of opportunities of professional learning and creating high expectations and really working with our students to have them to believe in themselves and to learn to pull themselves up by their bootstraps as they brought their lived experiences to school every day. And we began to bridge those lived experiences into the coursework um, for English language arts and for math, social studies, and science. From there, I moved on to becoming a assistant principal at one of the elementary schools. This is also in Fayette County Public Schools, which is in Lexington. I had the opportunity to have some socio-political consciousness conversations with our students from K through 5, and we would have these discussions over lunch. And I worked with University of Kentucky and their CRIOP and PSYOP program, which is the Cultural Responsive Instruction Observation Protocol, as well as our Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, where we had, teachers to participate in these programs at the University of Kentucky and as well as Georgetown College, and to really glean and to work towards really becoming more culturally responsive in our practices as we were working as a faculty and as we worked with students and families of various backgrounds, socioeconomically, as well as, again, ethnically, religion, language, just all those things that kind of really fit in the categories of our diversity, equity, inclusion work. From there, um, the late Superintendent Cock came to our school and really saw the need for culture responsive teaching and learning across the whole district. And the late Superintendent Cock is someone who I admire um, just with my whole heart and just really believed in me and really wanted this opportunity of equity work across our entire district. And so there was an opportunity to become a culture responsive teaching and learning coach for the entire district, where I worked with 75 schools in our district to really look into working in 30, 60, 90-day plans with some of our schools that had targeted supports and improvements at our middle schools and high schools, and working with our elementary schools had fallen in the status of CSI, which is comprehensive support improvements as well. And so I provided many, many high quality professional learning opportunities around the work of equity and inclusion, diversity, implicit bias, micro and macroaggressions, um, culture responsive leadership, culture responsive teaching and learning, not just in the classroom with educators, but we also looked at it in the terms of human resources and our hiring practices and just so many wonderful opportunities around this work. So, as I began to dive into my problem of practice for my capstone research, I want to address how has the Brown versus the board the Board of Education helped students of color in the 21st century? Why or why not? And I also want to say in my current role, I'm the Director of District-Wide Services at Newport Independent Schools, where I work with our Gifted and Talented program. Again, I have led the equity work at both districts that I've worked in Fayette County and now in Northern Kentucky, Newport Independent Schools. I've launched both of those opportunities, and we've had such wonderful learning, such wonderful progress in both districts. And I am just so honored to have this opportunity to now to begin to work, on myself and really trying to take this information a little bit further as we move into this equity work for the future. So I've often wondered, is equity work moving backwards? Are we becoming stagnant, or are we moving forward together? Um, I often have felt like we're becoming stagnant and that we are moving backwards slowly, especially if we have to dismantle all of the great work around the civil rights movement and Brown versus Board of Education and the 14th Amendment, looking at all of the opportunities through the NAACP, as you see in this timeline here in this powerful slide, and looking at just the opportunities of Plessy versus Ferguson, which is really the first case that happened before Brown, and then really thinking about the Jim Crow laws, World War II, and the Little Rock Nine in September of '57. So just really thinking about how important is this work that we, haven't really had the opportunity to really think about what was Brown really about? Brown was not solely about the integration of students of color being in the same schools with students who did not look like them. What Brown really wanted was the opportunity for our students to have the same access, an opportunity that students who did not look like them received, such as new textbooks, um, resources, better facilities, to have AC and heat and lighting and a beautiful structure on the inside and the outside, quality food and nutrition to ensure that, our students are getting, their needs met in that way as well, because we, again, have to reach the whole child. So the promise is still unfulfilled. There are great things that we're doing, but there is more work to be done. So when I think about, as I've explained, just kind of my current work, and I've also explained my personal experience, but this is why this is so important to me. 70 years of Brown versus the Board of Education ended legal segregation. Students of color still face unequal access to high quality education. School choice options like charter schools and CTE programs were meant to expand opportunity, but in many cases, they have reinforced racial and socioeconomic divides. So, as an aspiring superintendent, I aim to examine how those modern education systems can fulfill Brown's promise of equity, not just in law, but in lived experiences, much like what we've been talking about in the work in our EDD 800 course. So again, I know personally when I was in public school, I didn't have the opportunity to, one, to be a part of CTE pathways. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to provide that equity and access to all of our students across the nation. This will bring parity among all groups, to be able to have this type of exposure that will match their lived experiences as well as their gifts and talents that they bring to school with them for us to bridge and grapple with in this work every day. So when I think about, my precise question and what I want to inquire more about is, to what extent has the promise of Brown versus the Board of Education been realized for students of color in contemporary educational settings, particularly in relation to school choice and access to high quality learning environments. When I think about, you know, questions that, I want to find some answers around, I want to think about some questions in terms of process. What research methods or data sources would you recommend to best capture both the systemic structures and lived experiences that reveal whether school choice initiatives are perpetuating or disrupting segregation? And then I want to kind of lean in and focus and narrow, my lens towards, given the broad scope of schools choice, which specific model, charter schools, micro schools, or CTE programs do you think offers the most compelling lens of examining educational equity for students of color, and why? So when I think about where some of these answers may be found, when I think about the work that I've engaged in and had opportunities to explore, I've had the opportunity just to be thinking about disproportionality data, of course, looking at our academic scores and things of that nature as it relates to student data and disaggregated data. And again, that data of disproportionality, um, thinking about attendance, enrollment, and just really thinking about how can these answers be gleaned from this particular um, point of research and data, and how would I be able to tie all of those things together? So what literature or evidence, am I thinking about to inform this scholarship? I have named just a few that have really helped with really thinking about the timeline of Brown and diving into 70 years later and exploring the impact of Brown versus Board of Education, and kind of looking at just, the 70 years later, the story of Brown, and how, pictures can help really help provide a timeline and help give us some insight on, what has been realized in this promise 70 years later. I kind of feel like we're still stagnant, but then I also feel like we're moving backwards. But I do feel like this work is very, very necessary because by the time 2040 comes, we're going to be a majority minority. And so we have to be able to work with all students from all walks of life, from different nationalities, religions, cultures, backgrounds, different languages. Those opportunities are going to be something that is going to help us, to become better individuals in terms of providing that hope, joy, love, just very basic things that we can get back to humanize these opportunities with all of our students. So I'm also looking into NEA with the Brown versus Board of Education. Um, where do we go from here? The only way that we can go, or the only place we can go, is up from here. And I'm excited about this opportunity to really help us to think about policies, procedures, and practices, and how those particular things create systems and barriers and obstacles and a lack of opportunity and access for our students to participate in, um, to really truly bring out the very best out of the student. Again, as they bring their lived experiences, they bring their family connections and their community ways of being and knowing and thinking into our school community. How much more richer would that be? It excites me to be able to bridge that learning and make those connections and to meet more people that I want to discover and learn even more about. Um, I want to learn another language. I speak very just basic Spanish or very basic Chinese, and I can say hello and different things of that nature. But how awesome would it be to really be able to learn from someone who, you know, um, I'm not from that culture and their customs and traditions and their ways of being other than just food and dance. I want to learn more about them as an individual so that I can help them to lean into who they are, to love who they are, and to love where they come from in their background. Thank you for listening.